Taiwan, an Asian miracle economy. And without doubt, a foodie's paradise 24/7.
You can find good food anytime during the day and night in Taiwan.
Taiwan's cuisine is remarkably diverse and a challenge to define. Each chapter of Taiwan's history has left an indelible mark on its cuisine.
台湾这个地方非常复杂的历史、社会、政治因缘，使得台湾料理的面貌相对比较混沌不清。
Taiwan's colorful past tells of its first Aboriginal settlers and the migration of more than 1 million Han Chinese from provinces across the mainland, with the lasting legacy of its once colonial masters.
好像我们是一个时空胶囊，我们保存了很多来自不同地方的一个食物文明的记忆。
Discover how history, migration, and foreign influence have shaped the many tastes of this land. Journey into the heart of culinary Taiwan. Once a year, Taiwan's top chefs and most ardent foodies congregate at the Taiwan Culinary Exhibition. Since 1989, this food fest has been a major tourist draw. It's held to showcase the delicious variety of tastes and cultural influences that make up Taiwanese cuisine.
台湾的这种菜系的影响里面，大概从闽南过来，加上一个日本菜系的影响。那我们发展这个中华美食展的最大的用意，就是说，把台湾的菜肴好好的整顿，因为菜系呢太多。那我们也希望能够提升台湾的地位。
To introduce the island's food to the world, Asian and European gourmets and food critics have been invited here. But to many foreigners, the concept of Taiwanese cuisine is vague at best.
In Germany, I think as well as in France, we have no idea of Taiwanese food. We know Vietnamese food, we know food from Malaysia, we have Japanese restaurants, we have Chinese restaurants, but no Taiwanese restaurant.
很多国外的人哦，人家问到台湾说，台湾在美食上，你能指导我们吃什么？我现在认为在台湾的人，这句话都很困惑。
To even begin to understand Taiwanese cuisine, one has to appreciate both its history and geography. Taiwan is located about 180 kilometers off the southeastern coast of mainland China. It's a group of islands surrounded by resource-rich seas, including the mighty Pacific Ocean off the eastern seaboard. Its proximity to mainland China saw many Han Chinese migrate here, especially during the 17th and 18th century.
During this period, within a very short span of about 100 years, China experienced a great population growth, and this created a great pressure on food supply. Because of this food shortage and population pressure, people in coastal area began to think about new ways of making a living, and migrating to overseas become one option.
These migrants came from the mainland's coastal areas, primarily from the provinces of Fujian and Guangdong. They were mostly fishermen and farmers.
Because they live in the coastal area, they rely more on seafood as part of their cuisine. So when they come to Taiwan, they actually brought this type of cooking and cuisine style to Taiwan.
Today, Taiwan is the world's fourth largest deep-sea fish producer and the world leader in aquaculture farming. Most of what is caught or cultivated ends up on local dining tables. because Taiwanese love their seafood. And nowhere is this more evident than on its streets. At night markets like this, foodies are spoilt for choice. In recent times, one dish has emerged as perhaps Taiwan's most popular street food offering, the oyster omelette.
蚵仔煎是台湾美食的最好吃的东西，
好像台湾的威尔刚啦。
Such endorsements are music to the ears and cash register of 61-year-old Lai Bing-sun. He's been in the oyster omelette business for nearly 45 years. His introduction to this street food favorite came when he first arrived in Taipei from southern Taiwan. Soon, the oyster would be his world.
从小时候我跟这个蚵仔煎一点概念都没有。以前我家里在卖自助餐的时候，我知道有这么蚵仔一个东西，是到了台北以后，我们才知道有这么一个蚵仔煎。这是台湾纯种的地瓜粉，还有再来就是台湾纯种的一个土鸡蛋，再来我们有加一点那个青菜。台湾的料理就是说有山产、有海产，还有我们的鸡蛋，最重要就是我们的蚵仔，非常好。
While the dish itself takes just minutes to whip up, the process of cultivating its main ingredient, the oyster, is a time-consuming one. This is Guangdong, on the northwestern coast of Taiwan. It is also called Oyster Town for its once prolific cultivation of the pearl oyster. Nearly 3 centuries ago, Taiwan's first commercial oyster farms were set up here. Today, the descendants of some of Taiwan's earliest Chinese immigrants still farm oysters here in the traditional way. 62-year-old Li Wensong has been farming oysters since he was 16. Today, less than 300 families make a living doing this.
我做行业是以早阮阿公传到阮爸爸生阮7个姊妹拜老大。
This sputtering custom-made three-wheeler is Lee's ride to his oyster farm. He transports the empty shells he's prepared out to the beach, some 20 minutes away. This is how oysters have been cultivated for centuries here, on vast coastal plains. At low tide, the sea retreats as much as 2 kilometers. It exposes the oysters to essential elements and gives farmers like Lee the space to cultivate his mollusks.
阮王景蚵仔特色就是安尼呢，即有即热光会泡炒像即水若大会使泡个炒2-3钟久，啊蚵仔较会定白。
Oyster farming is part human ingenuity, part natural phenomenon. Empty oyster shells are hung on strings to serve as hosts. Oyster larvae called spats, found naturally occurring in seawater, settle on the shells. The tidal waters carry nutrients to these spats. Over time, and with sufficient sunlight, they will grow to become individual oysters.
蚵仔生长爱差不多我1年才会收的，较爱像这大丸才会收，才会采收的。爱种若像这较细丸这还袂收的。款算辛苦的工课，爱早暗爱赶落经才较会忍受的。
From the coast, oysters are delivered to markets and restaurants across Taiwan. En route, they are kept at a constant 3 to 6 degrees Celsius to ensure freshness. Oyster omelette cook Lai Bing-sun buys up to 50 kilograms of fresh oysters daily.
我们对蚵仔的好坏就是说一个黑白分明，它的身体外面的那个外围就是非常黑，表示它的身体非常健康。 白色就是它蚵仔的那个肚子，它本身的内脏非常好。
The obvious basic ingredients for Taiwanese oyster omelette are eggs and oysters.
I think oyster omelette is a very popular snack originally found in southeast coastal China. However, there's a significant difference between the Taiwanese version and the rest of the oyster omelette. And in Taiwan, the key ingredients are the sauce.
所以我现在带你去看我们煮酱的一个地方，好，
秘密的地方。
对对，哎，可以说一个秘密的地方啊。是的，好，那我们请过来吧。
The recipe for this sauce varies from one cook to the next, and it's often a well-guarded family secret.
这就是我们每一天所要煮的一个酱，这个是属于一个养生，不要加很多的调味料，直接我们用台湾的2砂，还有一些辣椒酱，还有一点花生酱，一下一煮的话，那就非常好吃了。我们把这个味道已经定型了。
Lai's special sauce has built him a loyal following, hungry 24/7 for one of the stars of Taiwanese cuisine.
蛙煎是我的兴趣，它不是我的职业。我也希望我们这个蛙煎，我们会传承下去，往后我们都一直在卖，让我的孩子有一个固定的工作，一个固定的生活。
Taiwanese oyster omelette, originally Chinese, and today very much made in Taiwan. Taiwan, one of Asia's miracle economies. The ambitions of its people are reflected in the frenetic pace of life in its capital, Taipei. This is a city that's constantly reaching for the future. But in the shadow of this modernity lies vestiges of Taiwan's past. This is a Zhuanchun, or old military quarters. Built in the late 1940s and 50s, these were accommodations for Kuomintang soldiers and their families who came from mainland China after losing the civil war against the Communist Party. Mainland China-born Wang Wenhua is a former Kuomintang or KMT soldier. He joined them in 1939 and was only 12 when he fled to Taiwan, leaving his family behind.
这是我同事，就是张照片，把它买在沙里头，然后收了装身上把它带过来，都导入过来，什么都没有，就是一个这张照片为基础。
Wang and others like him represent a volatile chapter in Taiwan's history. These days, their stories are being archived for posterity. In the 1940s, the KMT battled China's Communist Party. It was a clash of ideologies that resulted in defeat for the KMT and an exodus of mainlanders to Taiwan.
A significant number of soldiers, government bureaucrats, scholars, and their families also moved to Taiwan. I would say probably more than 1 million people moved from mainland China to Taiwan.
This is Air Force Village 1. It houses military families hailing from different provinces across mainland China. Their diverse backgrounds and customs would add variety to the island's cuisine and culture.
我们看看郑大哥他们烧什么菜。你们烧什么菜啊？
乌贼烧肉啊。
乌贼烧肉，哦。
对啊，浙江宁波的。
浙江宁波啊。你怎么会烧这道菜？
跟我妈学的。
你跟你妈学的？
从小看她烧。哦。烧久了以后，没事看一看，看会了。哦。把这个里面有酒，有冰糖，有八角。
八角。
好，然后我现在把它通过了，倒进去。
眷村它本身就是大陆各个省份的一个缩影。因为所有的军人啊，他都来自于大江南北，所以像我们的村子里面有四川人，有湖南人，有河北人，有江苏人，有各种不同省份的人，但他们所做的菜都不一样。那但是大家都互相保有他原来的那个传统的菜色。
Another resident, Cheng Yi-ting, is Taiwan-born. But she's inherited her father's mastery of his native Shandong-style cuisine.
有时候妈妈会做一些那个台湾料理，然后爸爸就是会做一些就比较北方的料理了。
While much of Taiwan's food today has been shaped by early immigrants from the mainland, the residents of military villages offered far more diverse tastes.
比如说山东人他喜欢面食啊，四川人是喜欢吃辣的啊，浙江人是吃比较清淡一点的，湖南人有一些菜会比较精致啊，就是比较不同的口味。
But the days may be numbered for Taiwan's Zhuanchun. Of the estimated 900 that once stood, no more than 140 remain. Many have had to make way for urban development, including Air Force Village 1. The people here will soon be relocating. So they've planned a celebration dinner to mark an end of an era. On the menu are delectable offerings such as pearl meatballs from Hubei province in central China. Also on the table, a Chinese delicacy, a sea cucumber recipe from Jiangsu province. Over time, authentic dishes from mainland China would flourish in Taiwan, moving from households to the streets.
Before 1949, rice is the staple in Taiwanese food, which is more the southern style people in Fujian and Guangdong. But starting from 1949, because a lot of the immigrants, they actually came from northern China, and their staple are the flour-based products such as noodles or steamed buns and dumplings.
These northern offerings would become part of the everyday Taiwanese diet. The post-1949 influx of mainlanders, called the second wave of immigrants, was a turning point in the island's history. Zhang Riyun served with the KMT Air Force. He was 14 when he came to Taiwan.
那个时候徐州马上要打仗了，打起来了，他说你不回不去了，我们就先撤退到台湾来了。
These days, 85-year-old Zhang manages the Yin Yi restaurant, a Taiwanese culinary landmark. Yin Yi means silver wings, hinting at the restaurant's origins.
来了以后哈，因为有几个副总司令，那个时候大陆餐厅没有哎，赶快打电话，把这个管辖这个师傅过来，到台湾就那么一直叫在下头，所以这个菜做出来还是一样，还有洋卤菜。
These immigrants tend to have more elaborate style of cooking in their culture. So in Taiwan, we can see that after 1949, a good number of high-end restaurants were developed and established in Taiwan.
The Yin Yi was originally an Air Force officers' mess. It was made a public restaurant in 1951. The food here is Huaiyang, a cuisine that dates back to at least 221 BC and is considered amongst the finest of Chinese regional cuisines. It hails from the prosperous Jiangsu province and is typical of the relatively middle-class influences the second wave of Chinese brought to Taiwan. Huaiyang cuisine comes from the regions surrounding the Huai and Yangtze rivers in Jiangsu province. It flourished in many of the region's trading cities.
淮扬菜，它因为当初在扬州一带，这个因为盐商的关系，那所以由那个为中心，变成说在扬州了、镇江、淮安，那么这一些延伸出来。那因为现在大陆的一些菜系的话，虽然是淮扬菜，但是它都还是有融合其他的菜系在里面。 哦，因为那个时候厨子已经不多了。
It's another busy night at the Yin Yi restaurant. Besides its regular civilian patrons, the Yin Yi is still a favorite with retired military personnel.
黄杰、黄总司令，还有那个李密、袁的那个都带我们吃个饭。不管小吃、酒席。 决定是我们的。
Huaiyang cuisine is characterized by complex cooking techniques. This was the preferred cuisine of Chinese aristocrats, government officials, and the wealthy. Since the 1950s, Huaiyang has been one of the choice cuisines for Taiwanese official banquets.
那淮扬菜本身注重的是在刀工跟火候，那么它以原汁原味为基础。
Huaiyang recipes are precise and detailed, and coming from an area served by major rivers, often uses freshwater ingredients. The popular and slippery braised eel with sliced bean curd is one such dish.
社会杀鳝鱼有没有啊？它这个就不是那么容易杀，因为烫的功夫也要烫得好，在它的骨头要剔掉，那它不容易。
To enhance the flavors, the eel is braised in chicken stock.
扬州菜就小火煨，小火慢慢炖，才能炖出味道来。
The restaurant believes the food served here is as authentic in taste, if not more so, than that found in mainland China today.
总监，你试试看这个回鱼干丝啊，哦，它这个是淮扬菜的2道名菜加在一起，
满汉全席或者现在中国的国宴里面都有这一道，哎。
As these KMT veterans savor the flavors of their youth, across Taipei, a more informal celebration is about to take place. Back at the village, the farewell feast has begun. In humble settings, dishes representing 8 major mainland provinces are featured. Culinary gems from Guangdong, Fujian, Sichuan, Shandong, Jiangsu, Hunan, and Jiangsu.
各位大家好，我今天有这样子的场面啊，要非常感谢我们村子的好邻居们，大家一起来共襄盛举啊，来完成这一餐眷村的美食。
The bonds of friendship amongst these residents will outlast Air Force Village 1, as will their contributions to Taiwan's cuisine, the varied flavors of provincial China.
眷村菜是因为它有各个不同省份的人在里面，做了各种不同的省份的菜，所以我觉得眷村菜它是可以丰富台湾的这个饮食文化。
These are the scenic hills of Beitou, an hour's drive north of Taiwan's capital, Taipei. It's one of the island's most popular resort destinations. The main attraction here, natural hot springs. In 1896, a Japanese businessman set up one of the first commercial spas here. But it was only meant for the Japanese, Taiwan's colonial masters at the time.
The Japanese colonial rule in Taiwan started in 1895 and it lasted until 1945. So within this 50 years of Japanese rule, Taiwan underwent a lot of changes. The most significant changes would be in culture and infrastructure. Japan did a lot of irrigation system in Taiwan, did a lot of urban planning in Taiwan, and even in living style.
The hot spring spa concept is a legacy of Japan's colonization of Taiwan. Except these days, all are welcome.
他们选择这个地方，就是说，北投有一个很特殊的这一种雷温泉，它是放射性的，它对人体是非常有帮助的，所以他们就选择这个地方，盖了一些旅馆，专门是给高级军官在这边疗养、休闲。
Chen Mei Dai has been a hotel and resort manager here for over 40 years. Her passion is preserving an important aspect of Taiwan's past, and not just the spa. Madam Chen also helps keep alive a culinary tradition with Japanese roots. The Japanese colonialists would leave their mark on local dining culture. A hybrid cuisine called jujia, or geisha food, grew in popularity.
所以在酒家菜时代就开始流行一些我们叫做很讲究的，像什么4色冷盘、8色冷盘，还有一些我们叫什么凤尾大虾，就是说菜都做得很细。这种菜做得很细，这个其实是日本菜的一个特色。
Taiwanese cuisine, once rustic and earthy, would be teased by the Japanese concept of the fine banquet, long drawn-out affairs with course after course of exquisite dishes.
在这个菜色方面就要配合，要搭档。冷盘一看出来颜色要很鲜艳，你吃了4个小时，它这个东西还不会坏的。
Today, it is locals who sit at dinner tables in Beitou, enjoying cuisine from the days when Japan ruled Taiwan. Decades later, Japanese food can be found all across Taiwan. It is a cuisine that Taiwanese have embraced wholeheartedly. But over time, some of this Japanese cuisine has inevitably been customized to suit the local palate. Even cuts of the classic Japanese sashimi are not spared.
台湾人有一个传统说手够短袜所以你看台湾人切的生鱼片都好大块可是台湾人就觉得很实在。可是问题说懂得吃日本料理的人会说你其实生鱼片不是比厚的这比是什么部位，还有就是说贴工这样子
To cater for Japanese cuisine purists, one Taiwanese is going to great lengths. There's none of this adaptation business for Chef Du Mingxian, even if it means fortnightly trips to Japan for choice ingredients.
在台湾的比目鱼比较小，但是土味比较重，品种不一样。它这个是上面比较大，然后里面的肉比较甜，比较 Q。
In 2007, Du set up Shanzi Japanese countryside cuisine, a snapshot of the Japanese Showa period, right down to the decor and the types of building materials used. This was a realization of a dream for Du, who had long been enamored with things Japanese.
我老爸他是传统，都常跑日本，他的一些习惯、一些语言都是像是以前的日本人一样。那回来就是带一些日本的玩具啊、おでん料啦，都是一大堆的产品给我们。从小就接触到为什么日本的产品会这么的好。
The food Du serves is inspired by the countryside cuisine of Hokkaido Prefecture in Japan's northeast. This cuisine is reflective of the farmers and fishermen who make up much of its population. It is down to earth.
乡土料其实很简单，没有什么特别的方法去制造东西，呈现出来是原味。乡土料理等于是说他们日本所说的他平常的菜。
From music to decor to food, Du has painstakingly recreated an authentic Japanese culinary experience. The restaurant's been pulling in a select clientele, including Japanese expatriates and tourists.
サバ。大阪のサバ。大阪の。
台湾でサバのね、これだけの刺身が食えるっていうのはないんですよ。
ないよ。台湾のサバはね、柔らかい。 もちろんない。そう、もちろんない。
Du's signature dish is country-style clay pot rice, popular amongst fishermen braving the chilly winters of Hokkaido. The dish is cooked in an iron version of the traditional clay pot.
煮这个饭都是要用心去给它顾。 因为它跟一般的不一样，就是说你要翻滚，让它下面的水蒸气能够循环上来，这是它的锅的最主要的方法。
おいしそうだ。おいし そうなの。いいよね。今これ日本のいいよこれ。全部ない。ないよなんか。そうか台湾でこれありえないでしょ。レンジ。そういう意味では台湾っていうのは我々が食べても非常に懐かしい味もするし非常に新鮮な味もする。
The popularity of such a niche Japanese cuisine demonstrates the Taiwanese attitude to food: adventurous, open, and accepting. An authentic slice of Japan in the heart of Taiwan. An unexpected page in the story of the island's cuisine.
谢谢，ありました。谢谢。
Nightfall. Amidst a sea of lights in bustling cities, and along its network of highways, another Taiwan emerges. Taiwanese, partaking of one of the oldest indulgences on the island.
一包怎么卖啊？50啊，什么50？50块。叶子青啊，松子青，你要什么？
But this is not what it looks like. These women plying their trade are betel nut beauties, amongst the estimated 60,000 who make a living selling betel nut. The betel nut is Taiwan's answer to chewing tobacco, a habit that dates back thousands of years to the island's first settlers.
Originally, betel nut was consumed only by the Aborigine people. They served betel nut at festivals as a way of celebration.
2008年马滩部落丰年祭活动开幕典礼，典礼开始。
Officially, there are at least 13 Aboriginal tribes in Taiwan, and most have been here long before the first Han Chinese arrived. The Ma Tai'an tribe of Hualien County are of Ami descent, one of the largest of the island's Aboriginal communities. Betel nut chewing has for centuries been part of Ami culture.
Tulungay no sangasif no mita upansa kira itsep hananay. Anira ko labang ato ini ko itsep. Anira ko wilang anu mamina ito. Ini ko itsep san usakalali tsay to ayay palusot no mita utamlang kira itsep hananay.
The Ami are a people of the land. Theirs is a culture that holds great respect and reverence for nature, believing all living things have spiritual significance, especially the crops that feed them.
Hamananam tu kira si kakaknen tu Hawaii, sa pisawat ko pantah tu Hawaii.
The millet is a hardy variety of grain the Ami consider the king of crops. Like the betel nut, millet is inextricably woven into the cultural history of the tribe.
台湾的这个土地上面只有小米在唱歌，以前是没有稻米的哈，所以如果你们到原住民的部落去哈，不管丰年祭啊或什么，就会看到他们在喝小米酒啊，还有很多捣小米做出来的一些饮食啊哈。
Anak ni san mipus-pus ka ko to paas ato turun ta mapu ni sunay ako kuturun.
Tulun, or millet cake, has a special place in Ami cuisine. It is prepared with great effort and ceremony.
要有独论吃哈，一定是在节庆重要的日子，比如说我们丰年祭啊，一定会做独论。 来招待亲朋好友或是自己家人啊，一年的辛苦收成完了嘛，所以来庆祝一下。
Tulun may have elevated status amongst Aboriginal tribes, but millet is used in a far more common Han Chinese confection called moachi. Made from either millet or glutinous rice, this popular snack is available in stores across the island. But it isn't just millet that's made it to mainstream Taiwanese cuisine. There's been, over the centuries, an exchange of culinary ideas.
原住民对台湾饮食影响的最大块，我认为是对于野菜的部分，还有包括吃番薯、吃芋头， 台湾人吃稀饭会吃番薯稀饭，因为番薯是原住民的主食，那稻子是汉人的主食，把原住民的主食跟汉人的主食加在一起，就会变成番薯稀饭。
The traditional staple of millet may have been replaced with rice, but many Aboriginals still cling on to centuries-old rituals and beliefs.
Kamu 槟榔对我们这个阿美族部落哈，尤其是马滩这个部落，它是非常神圣的。所以我们一家子大概只种几颗槟榔，就在家附近，从来没有像现在满山遍野都是槟榔。
Once part of a sacred ritual, the betel nut today is cultivated on a large scale, on an estimated 50,000 hectares across the island. That's nearly 70,000 soccer fields. The betel nut palm is native to Taiwan and is relatively inexpensive to cultivate. Each tree has a yield of between 100 and 600 nuts and is harvested twice a year. The consumption of betel nuts in Taiwan rose dramatically between the 70s and 90s. It is a lucrative multi-million-dollar business. Little wonder the betel nut came to be called green gold. But then, not all that glistens is gold. The betel nut tree has shallow roots. When planted on hillsides, it makes soil erosion and landslides a very real threat. But it isn't just the environmental hazards that has Taiwanese authorities concerned.
槟榔对环境带来的伤害是比不输对人带来的伤害。
For consumption, the betel nut is slit open and a calcium hydroxide paste is added. This acts as a catalyst, releasing intoxicating stimulants into the body when chewed. Betel nut chewing in Taiwan accounts for most of the nearly 2,500 deaths from oral cancer each year.
所以基本上，我觉得整个这个背后都还是跟放纵，譬如说吃太多槟榔是放纵，还有把槟榔种在山坡地上面，也是一种贪婪。就说放纵贪婪造成了槟榔这个本来是仪式性的食物，本身并不完全代表邪恶的东西，而如今变成对人变成一种非常负面的一个食物。
In the hills of Hualien County, the Army Harvest Festival reaches its peak, a celebration of their spiritual bond with the land, a thanksgiving for the treasures nature has blessed them with for centuries. This is Taiwan's iconic Taipei 101. On the 85th floor, amidst lush decor, patrons dine on an unlikely cuisine. Upmarket versions of the island's famous street food. Elegantly and aesthetically presented, it's window dressing for a culinary experience that is far more down to earth. In streets all across the island, crowds jostle for their favorite treats. When it comes to Taiwan's street food, variety is the order of the day, an a la carte frenzy. There's Taiwanese sausages, the famous oyster omelette with secret sauce, local corn on the cob, steamed pork buns, salted deep-fried chicken, and the self-incriminating stinky tofu. It's a mouth-watering spread.
You can find good food anytime during the day and night in Taiwan. I think it says something about Taiwanese people's attitude toward food. They want to have good food and they want to have it all the time.
Of Taiwan's many street food havens, one is worthy of special attention, the port city of Tainan. Tainan is Taiwan's oldest city. Its streets are rich with history. In imperial times, this was the island's capital. The city has less prominence in modern Taiwan, resulting in a slower pace of life. But this has also helped preserve some of its centuries-old culinary culture, especially the snacks or xiaoqu that's found on its streets.
Tainan is actually one of the earliest settlements of immigrants coming from mainland China. So when we go visit Tainan, we can find some very refined xiaoqu, which is unique to this area, and you could not find it elsewhere in Taiwan.
These days, walking food tours of Tainan are popular amongst Taiwanese. Renowned gourmet and food writer Ye Yilan enjoys leading them.
你要是看在台南啊，如果有哪一个区有很多很多的小吃的话，你就会知道说，哎，这附近一定有一间庙。原因是因为台南的那个小吃很多很多是围绕着庙的周围，因为从古早以前就很多人要来参拜，参拜就要吃东西，所以说它就有很多。其实台南很多很传统古老的小吃都是这样子起来的。那神明有保佑，东西就好吃。
Tainan boasts hundreds of Buddhist and Taoist temples. In the city's early days, this is where people congregated, creating the ideal conditions for street food to flourish.
中国人常讲说我们要祭五脏庙嘛，那刚好庙口也是祭神又祭自己五脏庙的地方。
This was the food for the everyman, from farmers, fishermen and laborers, to those higher up the social ladder.
那个是什么？花生粉，花生粉加上糖。然后还有虾。台湾是一个不太有太多阶级的地方，大部分的人其实都是还是在类似同样的一个水平上面在生活，所以很自然的就是我们的饮食它就变成不是往很高的一个精致度发展，而是往一个横向它往它的多元化去发展。
Much of the street food found across Taiwan today has its origins in Tainan. There are now regional variations of these dishes, but in Tainan, the original recipes are still used.
围绕着这个区有很多很多的小吃，都非常的有名。
Arguably, one of the most iconic of Tainan's dishes is milkfish porridge, a hearty, nutritious breakfast favorite.
那在台南的话，因为我们就是近海养殖大量的那个虱目鱼，所以说我们其实早上就是把它捞捕起来之后，很多就是把它煮来做成粥，或是做成汤，然后每一个部分都可以吃，鱼皮、鱼肚、鱼肠。
Milkfish porridge is made with a fish called chanos or silmoyi. Garlic slices, oysters, half-cooked rice, fish bones, and rice wine are also added.
看到这个，那个是虱目鱼汤，鱼粥，这个最好吃的地方在里面哦。你看很多的那个胶质，还有的那个肉是最软。
Shimuyu or milkfish is something that people would identify with Tainan. That's actually where the dish was originated. And of course, later on, it became very popular all over Taiwan.
These days, many Taiwanese are beginning to discover and embrace their own culinary identity.
移民为主的一个国家的一个重点，就是在于说心胸非常开放，然后而且就是思考非常的灵活。我们很宽广的去包容，而且去接受其他不同地方的饮食文化，不断的在加入我们自己的饮食里面来，然后使得它的多样性跟丰富度越来越大。
From its earliest Aboriginal settlers to the contributions of migrants from mainland China, to the influence of the Japanese who once ruled it. Each has added its unique flavor to the island's cuisine. But the story of culinary Taiwan is still being written.
In Taiwanese cuisine nowadays, you can see a mirror of Taiwanese history. It actually shows you how Taiwan has evolved as a society.